A very, very good evening to everybody who's joining us from across the country today. Thank you all for tuning in. This is the fourth talk in a series of discussions sponsored by the Atal Incubation Center at Dayanand Sagar University. My name is Atanu. I am the founder and CEO of Capsule Labs. And in today's discussion, we will be focusing more on trying to understand about pricing and revenue models for your startup. So far in our discussions, we have covered multiple topics. We have discussed why perhaps this is one of the best times to start your own organization, especially if you are still in college, where you get the benefit of academic credit for the work you do in your startup environment. You get a lot of project relaxations for working in the startup, right? So essentially, you can leverage your final year in terms of creating a prototype or a minimum viable product that could be taken to market. In most organizations, in most higher educational institutions today, there is an institutional incubation center. The more mature ones are called Atal Incubation Centers, where there is a lot of space available, where companies, students' ideas can get incubated as companies, and there is a lot of mentorship support and pre-incubation services that are available as part of the incubation process. So while you are thinking about creating your product, it's important to keep an eye open for how you want to price your particular product, right? What are the unit economics that are going to play a part in your product itself? What I mean by that is, in many cases, you would need to perhaps buy some equipment. You would perhaps need to invest in additional consultation fees. There are compliance fees. So there are multiple cost factors that come in your product, when you are building your product itself. So there is the entire R&D expense. Plus, for every product or service that you are offering, you are incurring an additional cost. Right? So you would want to make sure that you are making more money, or your revenue streams are sufficient to justify and offset that cost itself. Right? In today's discussion, we are going to focus around four main topics, if you will. Right? The first one is around the revenue models. What are the different kinds of revenue models you could be thinking about as you go to market with your product? Right? In many cases, we will find that when you are selling, when you are getting into a financial transaction, you may not be selling your the right of ownership, or you may not be selling the designs of the product itself, right? So you may be licensing it. And what are the licensing terms and conditions that you may expect to find if you are licensing a particular product? So we will take a deeper look into that. Thirdly, we will focus on pricing tactics. If you have different objectives of selling your product, for example, if you are trying to gain more penetration into the market, you might be thinking about discounting your prices so as to gain an immediate market share. So these are tactics that are involved in terms of your pricing. And finally, we will take a look at how do you project your revenues. If you are building a product and you have a particular target market in mind, you have a number of people you are projecting to reach, right? What would be the revenues that you make out of that over the next quarter, over the next couple of quarters, and does that justify you spending money and the kind of resources that you would be spending in the R&D of the product itself? Right. I also have with me Mr. Vinod Shankar, who is the CEO of the Atal Incubation Center at Dayanand Sagar University. He, towards the end of the discussion, he would be spending a lot of time with every one of you, right? Whoever has questions with respect to how can you start up your organization, how can you get your ideas and organizations incubated at the Atal Incubation Center. These are the kind of questions, the application process, the follow-ups, the kind of space and services that you get at DSU. Right? So these are things that Mr. Shankar would be able to address towards the end of the discussion. So that said, let me get started with revenue models itself. Right? What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, the purpose for a business to exist is to be able to deliver products, services, or a combination of products and services to its customers and essentially receive some kind of a payment or feedback in response. In our discussions in the last month, we talked about how do you build products and services, what are the differences between products and services, and how the line between products and services are blurring over time, right, as new mixed models are coming into the market, right? So the business model essentially tells us how the company is creating value for itself while delivering products and services to its customers, right? Now, in many cases, this relationship between the business and the customer is not always straightforward, or rather, let me rephrase myself, the relationship between the business and the end customer is not always so straightforward. And this is where what you will find is that there are a number of intermediation platforms or marketplaces. Right? What do these do? Well, you find that there are intermediation platforms in two categories. So you have resellers, right, who are buying products from a particular manufacturer, and then they are selling it to further down the stream, right? So they're selling it to customers. So essentially what these resellers are doing is that they are abstracting the end customers from the business itself. Similarly, there are marketplaces and intermediaries who play, as the name suggests, an intermediate role. Right? So customers buy from the intermediary, who in turn promotes your business. So the intermediaries, essentially, they are abstracting the financial transactions between the business and the customers. Right? So I think all of us would be able to name quite a few of these intermediation platforms, because these platforms exist for business-to-business transactions as well as for business-to-consumer transactions. So if you wanted to take a quick look at such companies, right? Companies like Flipkart or Uber or Zomato or Swiggy, right? They are all providing an intermediation service between the customers and the service provider, right? So Flipkart, the actual seller on Flipkart, right? They don't get to know about the customers, right? The marketplace is being moderated by Flipkart itself. Same with Uber. Which driver partner actually gets allocated for your ride is something that is decided by the intermediary platform itself, right? You also have very similar platforms that are available for essentially businesses to go for and buy from other businesses as well, right? So you have marketplace, B2B marketplaces like IndiaMart.com or TradeIndia.com, right? Which are essentially going to provide wholesale prices or maybe contacts of other businesses, right? Similarly, Just Dial, you can just call up Just Dial and say that you're looking for a particular type of service, and your request will get passed on to multiple providers so that they can get in touch with you. So you can call as an individual, or you can also perhaps call as a business. Right. Before I go further, let me just quickly talk about a few fundamental concepts, right, so that we are all on the same page. And although there are a few terms that can seem similar, there are nuanced differences between them, right? For example, if I wanted to talk about revenue channels, right, a revenue channel is a specific path or a method through which a business captures value or generates revenues from its customers, right? For example, a business could have a B2B channel. It could also potentially have a business to consumer channel or a D2C channel, right? So the money could be coming in from another business. The money could be coming in from end consumers themselves. So these specific paths are essentially called revenue channels. Then you have the revenue model, right? The revenue model is the way a business generates revenue, right? And this is something that typically encompasses the entire business model, right? For example, if a company says that they are into direct sales, if that is their revenue model, then they might be generating that direct sale through a shop. They might be generating it from their website. They might be generating it from people walking into their warehouse, right? But it is always the end customer who is getting invoiced for a particular product that they are buying, right? So typically, a small, medium-sized business will typically have one revenue model, and there could be multiple ways the model is getting implemented, right? Each of these separate paths are essentially what we call is the revenue stream, right? So a revenue stream refers to a specific source of revenue within a business itself, right? So within a direct sales model, there could be a revenue stream coming in from brick and mortar stores. There could be a revenue stream that is coming in from digital sales, right? So I just wanted to clarify all these 3 points so that we are all on the same page in terms of what a revenue channel is, what a revenue model is, and what a revenue stream is. Right. Now, there's one more term that I would like to introduce over here, and that is essentially around what we call our pricing tactics. Right. So pricing tactics are specific strategies to set and adjust the price competitively to retain or to gain market share. Right. So, for example, discounts are a very, very popular pricing tactic. Coupons and coupon codes, right? They are pricing tactics. Sales are another pricing tactics, right? So essentially, when you know what is the price point of your product, what is the price point you want to sell it at, right? If you are modifying that end point, the final sale price, right, in order to achieve some other objective, whether it is to gain market share or to move from a particular positioning to a more niche positioning to a more premium positioning, you essentially get into these pricing tactics itself, right? Now, let's go into each of them in a little bit more detail so that things are going to be a little bit more clear, right? Let's talk about revenue channels first, right? And as I have already mentioned, your revenue channels, there are a few direct models, right? The direct model is essentially, you could be a business who is getting your money, your revenue channel could be coming in directly from your retail consumer, right? So you could have a B2C model, right? Or it could be coming in from another business, which makes it a B2B model. Or it could be coming in from the government, right? In which case we'll call it a B2G model, right? Now, why these channels have been kept separate is that the way you reach your customers, right, are essentially going to be different for each channel. You cannot use the same kind of pricing tactics, the same kind of strategies to market to a government as you would to market to a retail consumer, right? So because the fundamental approach towards your consumer is different, to your customer is different, that is why these channels have been called out separately. But they are all direct models because you are essentially looking to get some money or remuneration from from the customer itself, right? Now, in many cases, what ends up happening is you may not have a direct path. Your particular business or your particular product, you might not be able to sell it directly to the end customers, right? So you might have to go through some kind of an intermediation platform, right? In which case, there could be one platform, there could be multiple such platforms that are involved, right? Which is why I've put a big star in the middle, saying that it could be a business to consumer model, or it could be a business to a business to a business to a business model, right? It can get, the value chain can increase significantly, right? So typically though, we find more than one intermediary is a rare scenario, right? So that gives us a sense of what the revenue channels are, right? What are the direct and the indirect models of revenue channels, right? Now, in this channel, we have to understand that we have to set up our own revenue model, a particular way that a business is going to make money, right? And this is what today's discussion is really going to be about, because as you build your organization, right? In many cases, a lot of IoT ideas get pitched to me, and when I ask them about how they're going to make money, what is it that they are going to be selling, right? I see a lot of confusion coming in. I see in many cases the pricing. Many young entrepreneurs tend to price their products on the lower side because they assume that if let's say, for example, you're offering a drone service for pesticide spraying, right? In many cases, the cost of the service is equated to the cost of the hardware itself, right? But if the revenue is essentially going to come from the services side, then the pricing can be changed accordingly, right? So it's important to look at the right kind of revenue model that fits your business, right? And in many cases, it is a discovery process. It is not that you, when you start your business, the first revenue model that you think of is going to click with the customers, right? Sometimes you might want to try out different models. You could try to perhaps have a fixed price model, right? Gradually, you may find that people are not willing to pay a high fixed price upfront, so you may want to move to a more of a rental model, right? So these are just ways you are going to make money, and I'm going to show you a few examples, perhaps, right? That will probably give you a sense of how the models differ between themselves, and you will probably have to pick up which one is the best model for your scenario, right? Say, for example, you are, we take the example of Netflix, right? It's a very popular service, and all of us are familiar with what Netflix does. You buy a subscription, right? So the fundamental revenue model of the company is subscription-based, right? So customers pay a recurring fee for access to a product or service, right? So very clear, very clean revenue model for them, right? If I take the example of say the Telegraph, right, which is a newspaper. A primary revenue comes in from advertising, right, from renting out by selling ad space or impressions, right? Why did I keep impressions over there? Advertising can happen in a physical world or in the digital world as well, right? So in a physical world, when you are talking about newspapers for that matter, right, there is a physical ad space that is getting sold, right? Or when you are talking about advertising on the radio, right? So there is a spot that is being sold. But if somebody has a virtual real estate, for example, a blog site or a web page, right? In that case, it is an impression, an ad impression that is counting towards advertising. Right? In many cases, businesses may charge a fee for a transaction that takes place, right, irrespective of the value of the transaction itself, right, or it could be a proportion of the transaction, right. It goes both ways. eBay is a classic example, right. If you are selling something on eBay, buying something on, if you're selling something on eBay, then you're based on the amount of remittances is remitted, there is a transaction fee associated with it. We'll also find this in other marketplace models as well, right? There is, Amazon for that matter, right? Amazon, it gets money from transaction fees as well as commissions, but from the products that are sold over there, and it can also make money from advertising other products or sponsored ads, as they call it, right? For direct sales, it's a direct, as the name suggests, it's a direct sell, right? So you are earning your revenue by essentially selling a product or a service, and products like Coca-Cola, right? Classic example. You go to a shop, pay some cash, and get a bottle of Coca-Cola, right? That's about as simple as a business model, as a revenue model as it can get, right? Very, very transaction oriented, right? And the payment gets collected almost immediately, right? Then we find a number of software services primarily getting into this freemium model, right? Freemium as in a mix of free and premium, right? So multiple categories of service available, with the basic version being free, and as you go along the other plans, right, you get additional functionality, right? So you'll find a lot of APIs are sold like this. A lot of SaaS services are sold as freemium models, right? Very similarly, we have zip cars or car rental services, which is a kind of a pay-per use of the product, right? Every time you are booking a vehicle, you pay for it, right? It is also the product doesn't transfer ownership, but every time every invoice that is created is basically around individual usage. We have not seen a model like Kickstarter in India, as far as I recollect, but very, very popular revenue model in the US, where if you are starting a project, you can actually get crowdfunded, right? By promising the crowd freebies or promising them early release of the solution, right? Or a discounted pricing after it is developed, right? So this kind of allows you to raise funds in a very different way. You raise small funds from a large number of people, and essentially what you are selling them is early access, right? Early access or discounted pricing, right? Licensing is another very, very popular way for revenue models, right? Of course, Microsoft by licensing out Windows, right? That was one of the first mass scale adoption of licensing in the that we kind of hear about. If you look at companies like ARM, right, where they license out their microcontroller designs and things like that, their primary and probably their only revenue model is through licensing. Right? So there are many companies where that is the only thing that they do. Right? Other revenue models. If you look at Facebook, for example, right? Facebook, it makes a lot of money from its data, right? Revenue generated by licensing access to usage or user data, right? Of course, it is anonymized to a certain extent, but essentially by parsing through that data, advertisers are able to figure out what category they want to go after, where is the most likely target for a particular product, right? So their revenue model is based on the data itself, right? I already discussed Amazon. Let me come to McKinsey, right? One of the big four consulting firms, and their revenue is from expertise delivered as professional services. So they are management consultants, right? So they have partners who are extremely well versed with, probably on the legal side or on the compliance side, or in terms of managing business transitions, and they provide their consultancy to organizations for a professional fee. Right now, you don't have to be a McKinsey to have a consultancy model. You can do it even as a one-person company. If you are offering your professional services, say as a doctor or as a lawyer or even as an engineer, right? So this is consulting services for which you can charge professional fees, right? So your business model is based around consultation, which means either time or value for the experience that is being shared. Right. Hotels, they typically go after a rental model, right? And when you talk about rental, you are, around one of the differences between physical models, right? With rental models, you are renting out physical assets or property, right? You could be renting out a hotel room, you could be renting out a car, you could be renting out space. So you could be renting out many physical things, right? So unlike, or even if it's like a shared workspace, right, that kind of still works on a rental model, right? Many companies go out with a franchisee model, right? And with the franchisee model, you are controlling the brand, but you have a different business who is running your brand, and you are essentially selling the right to use your business model, your logo, maybe even your business processes, or even a particular recipe, right? So the franchisees, they are making money. The franchises themselves, they are making money by as commissions on whatever is sold, or they are able to. They're paying you that franchisee fees because they are able to attract a lot more customers because of that brand name, right? So essentially, you are getting money for the brand that you have built up, right? IPL is a classic example of where you are making money from sponsorship by partnering with companies and in order to promote them, right? So whether it is a Byju's that is sponsoring, or a Tata that is sponsoring, right? So essentially, they are getting advertising, they are getting getting to reach a large audience, and in respect to that, they are paying you a fee in order for their logo to appear in all your merchandise, right? There's also affiliate marketing, and what I've been seeing is that there are many individuals or even one-person companies which are essentially making money from promoting promoting other brands, right, to a certain extent, so that they promote a link to a product, so that if that link is used in order to buy a particular product, in which case they would get a commission of the sale value, right? So it is revenue from promoting other companies' products or services and earning a commission on resulting sales, right? So I've seen many small and medium-sized operations which are based on affiliate marketing, which are trying to write a blog about a particular topic or so, and essentially allowing ads on that, so that any ads that is clicked on their blogs essentially leads you to a commission-based link, right? With the advent of mobile games and things like that, there's also a revenue model that is based around in-app purchases, right? Whether it is mobile apps are making a lot of money out of promoting ads, but then there are virtual objects that may be available for, virtual objects or experiences, right, that are available for sale within that app itself. So essentially, when you are paying money to an app like that, you're essentially paying it for virtual goods, right? So revenue from virtual goods within a mobile app or a game, those are referred to as in-app purchases. Right. So there's quite a few more we can go on around it, but I think I want to move to other topics as well. But just for the sake of completion, let me just cover a few others. Right. There's referral marketing. Dynamic pricing is something that we are very that we are very aware of, because every time we go buy an airline ticket, the prices change. Same with surge pricing. You can also call it surge pricing. We have seen that with Uber, with a lot of the transportation-based companies, right? And then there are royalty-based models as well, especially when there is licensing that is involved. So that kind of gives us an overview of multiple revenue models. Now, which model works for you, right? That is something that you will have to first decide on a model that you want to apply to your business, and then what you might have to do is go to the market and see how your customers are responding to that, right? You may start off with a particular model, and then you may figure out that the customers are not willing to pay that, or they're not willing to accept your terms and conditions of that revenue model, right? In which case you may have to pivot into something which is more acceptable to your customers, right? So that kind of brings me to my next topic of licensing restrictions, right? And what I wanted to cover over here was essentially, when you are talking about the previous models that I discussed, how you are making money, which model you are using, you are selling something, right? Essentially, you are selling something, and a sale typically, if it's a sale of a physical product, it typically implies some kind of a transfer of ownership of the product, right? With the once you have sold something, the seller has no further rights on that product itself. That's the classical notion of a sale. If you bought some saucers, right? You have bought it home, right? You have brought it home, and the shopkeeper has no further rights on that saucer or the dish, right? But in the last few years, or maybe in the last 3-4 decades, right? What has been happening is we are also selling a lot of digital products, right? And with digital products, you do not get, even though what you are getting is essentially a copy of the original work, right? With digital assets, only a copy of the original work is being sold, and when you buy a piece of code, or or download a song, or some kind of an NFT, right? The seller who's selling to you could potentially lose revenue, because the buyer can become competition. If I download a song and then start to sell that, the original singers who own who have created that particular product, right? I suddenly become a competition to them, right? So hence, the sale is not just direct, it has to be restricted through licenses. There has to be some mechanism through which some mechanism or licensing terms and conditions which will not permit the same level of privileges to the buyer as is available to the seller or the creator of that particular digital product, right? So when you go and buy, say, for example, a Windows license, right, you are not the owner of, you get a copy of the binary, but you are not the owner of the Windows software, right? So that is very, very important. So whenever this kind of a sale happens, it is important that there is some understanding of what are the terms and conditions of the sale. So a license is nothing but a legal agreement between two parties that is granting the licensee, which could be a person or organization that receives the license, the right to use, access, or distribute a particular product or service. So already there are multiple restrictions that have come in the licensing terms itself, right? And what kind of terms and conditions are we talking about, right? What are the limitations or restrictions on how the licensee may use the product or services, and for giving you the license, whatever fees or royalties that may be required that you are paying as consideration for getting the license, right? I wanted to delve a little deeper into these licensing restrictions because, as young innovators, as young people who will be starting up your own companies very, very soon, right? In many cases, you have to be very sure in terms of what you are licensing. If you are selling something, what exactly is it that you are selling? Because you're not giving away the rights to your design or the secrets and the efforts that have gone into building your product, right? So you might want to restrict the sale of your product or service in some way or the other. What ways are these? Say, for example, you have a usage restriction, right? And the usage restriction basically says that you are limiting the number of devices it can be used on, right? For example, if you have used Hotstar, right? Hotstar says that if you are buying a 199 rupee plan or a 799 rupee plan, you can play it on up to 2 devices concurrently, right? So this is a usage restriction, right? Or you can restrict it to something more generic. You can restrict it to saying that it is available for non-commercial purposes only, right? So many softwares that you get under open source licenses may have this criteria. So if you are using somebody else's product, you have to be aware of what are the restrictions under which you are operating, right? For an open source software to be free does not really mean that it has no restrictions of usage, right? In many cases, you can have copying restrictions, right? The most popular example is with ebooks, right? If you are buying an ebook, you are getting a digital copy of the book, and you are prohibited from copying it, from redistributing that book, right? Those are the conditions under which you have bought that, right? So prohibiting the licensee from making copies of the licensed product or services, those are copying restrictions, right? You can also have distribution restrictions, right? So you are giving the licensee the right to use your product or your service, but you are preventing them from reselling it to somebody else, right? So you might again be allowed to download some music, but you cannot share the music because you are not the copyright owner of that music itself, right? You are not the license owner of you are not the license holder of that piece of music, right? So you can have conditions which say that a licensee will not be able to distribute the product further. There could be restrictions that are made on modifications. You can use the product as is, but if you modify the product, then warranties could become void, right? Or in many cases with open source software, right, if you are making any modifications to the original source code, then the source code has to be, then the modified code will also be considered as open source, right? So many open source licenses have this term. You can also have a time restriction. How long is the license valid? Right? Is it valid for a year? Is it valid for 3 months? Is it valid for perpetuity? Right? In many cases, especially when it comes to copyright transfer, when you assign works of intellectual output, right? There is time restrictions in terms of when you license it out, whether it is, it can be, the copyright laws can be kept around for about 20-25 years and then it comes in the public domain. So that's a time restriction of that, right? Or you could restrict sale to geographic areas only, right? So there are export guidelines that come in when when you sell a particular product itself, you might say that this product or this license is valid only within the territory of India, or only within Bengal, right, for that matter. So when you are creating a licensing agreement, you have to be a little careful in terms of the clauses that you are putting in, right? Because the more unrestricted the license is, the costs of licensing go up, because the original license owner is always going to come back and ask you that, they are potentially losing revenue from from being able to sell that work again, right? Which is why the cost of licensing may go up if it is very open-ended. The more restrictions that come in, the more restrictions you have on the license, the prices can be negotiated to a lower amount, right? So that's how you negotiate on licenses itself, right? Other kinds of restrictions that come about in the license, well, they include access restrictions, right? User restrictions, language restrictions, right? Support restrictions. What is the level of support that the licensee is entitled to? Can they call up the calls? Can they call up a call center at any point, or is the support restricted from 9 to 5, or is it 9 to 5 only on Mondays, right? So those are restrictions that come in the license. It's the support restrictions that come in the license itself, primarily because there is a cost to providing that support, right? If you are providing 8 hours of support for 5 days a week, that costs you a different amount than saying that you will provide 24/7 support for any queries that are coming in. It will cost the licensor much more, and therefore the cost of that license will also be on the higher side, right? There could be hardware restrictions, right? There could be hardware restrictions in terms of what kind of devices can you use this on, right? So any combination is really possible. So typically when you are creating a license in order to sell your product or services, it is recommended that you you kind of consider legal advice, right? And this is again where incubation centers like AIC DSU, right, they can help a lot, because they have the pre-incubation service. They have a legal team who can guide startups in terms of what their licensing policy should be, right? We have quite a few more, actually. We have quite a few more in terms of other ways licenses can be created, in terms of renewal restrictions, right? When can it be renewed? Can it be renewed or not? How many times can it be renewed, right? In terms of scalability, how many times, when you buy licenses for using APIs, for that matter, right? There are scalability restrictions. You can only fire, say, a million requests per day, right? So essentially, can you export that particular product? Can you pass it on without attribution, right? So many ways it comes in. Warranty restrictions. What are the conditions under which the warranty are applicable? And if it is void, when does it get void, right? There could be non-disclosure restrictions. If you buy that license, you cannot tell anybody else that you bought that license, right? So you are prohibiting or you are requesting the licensee to keep a lot of maybe the cost price of that confidential, or where it is getting used. You're looking for those things to be kept secret, right? And you can put that in your licensing terms and conditions itself, right? So the gist of this whole discussion essentially is that if your product is such that it requires you to license its usage, right, then it is better to get a seek legal advice and get a well-drafted license in place, right? Similarly, when you are using or you are consuming somebody else's intellectual property, you must carefully go through their licensing terms, so that it does not come back at you later on, right? After you have, you use some open source software that had non-commercial restrictions, non-commercial usage restrictions, and then you go ahead and, you're about to launch your product, and then you get to know that you cannot do that, right? So that's a bad situation, right? Because even though open source is free, you have to understand that it is still a restrictive license, right? In the sense that if you look at the major open source licensing protocols that are available, including GPL license or an Apache license or MIT license or a BSD license, these are among the more popular ones. There are plenty more licensing options, right? What you will find is GPL requires copyleft. Right. So derivative works must always be licensed under the same license. That's what copyleft means, right? As opposed to copyright, right? Is commercial use allowed? I think all these four major licenses typically allow commercial use, right? But there's no indemnification, right? So if you are using open source license, there is no support to it. You cannot call up a help center and say that, I used your a product with your license, therefore, it's not working, right? So you cannot claim that because it is licensed as such. It is licensed on a, use at your own risk kind of a caveat, right? Are modifications allowed? Yes, all four of these licenses allow for modification of the original work itself, right? Are you allowed to distribute? Well, all these four licenses allow for distribution of the original work and any other derivative works, right? Because it is not owned by anybody. So because it is not owned by anybody, when you distribute, you're also saying that you have the right to go ahead and distribute it, right? Is attribution necessary? In the top three, no. But for BSD licenses, attribution is optional. So if you're creating a derivative work using BSD, you may attribute the original source work as being developed by BSD, right? So very important to understand that if you are not selling your product outright, if you are selling just a copy of your product, right? If you are selling a copy of your intellectual works, you are going to face into licensing issues. And typically, if you are selling your SaaS service or whatever from a website, typically these licensing conditions should be available on your website itself, right? Along with your privacy policy and all of that, wherever you are, whatever your point of sale is, where somebody is checking out your product, you should have the licensing conditions well explained there. Now, in many software, when you install a software on your computer, you will find that you need to accept something called the end user licensing agreement or the EULA agreement, right? So that is where you are, all the details of where you can use that product, where, under what conditions you can use that product, right? All of that is detailed, and acceptance of that EULA document is mandatory for use before you use that particular product itself, right? I hope everybody's clear on that. There are, I am getting questions on YouTube itself, right? So if you wanted to go in and put up questions there as well, you're most than welcome to do so, right? I will be taking those questions shortly as well, right? This brings us to the third part of our discussion, which is with respect to pricing tactics, right? And as I had mentioned in my overview, in many cases, a company decides to have a particular price point or to go after a price point based on a business objective, and the business objective may not necessarily be profit maximization in the short run. In every case, right? So essentially, even pricing is a process of discovery. Companies can take years to identify what should be the right price, right? That their consumer segment, that their customer segment is willing to pay, right? So you could have cost plus pricing, right? Cost plus pricing essentially is you know that what your raw materials are, how much labor is going in, what are your distribution and inventory costs, right? And then you add a margin on top of the materials and labors, and you have a cost plus pricing. It's a very simple way of calculating. Typically, if you have a manufactured product, you might be able to use that, right? In many cases, you can have predatory pricing, or you may even have penetration pricing, where you are launching a new product in a market and you want to gain very quick market share very, very quickly, right? So you might go in for very, very deep discounts, primarily so that, customers, your competitors' customers start to try your product, right? So this kind of penetration pricing is not sustainable in the long run, but it provides you an immediate customer base, right? It provides you with a very, very quick customer base. Now, in many cases, in order to afford this penetration pricing, this very low penetration pricings, you might actually offset the cost of your product from your marketing budgets itself, right? So in many cases that happens, where you launch a product with a large marketing budget and you start selling the product perhaps even below cost, right? So if you look at how when probably Ola or Uber came into the market, and they were trying to penetrate a market that was dominated by cab services, right? So by formal cab services, and by promising low fares, by promising incentives for the driver partners, right? They were able to create a habit. They were able to get many more people to try out their service, eventually getting to the point where many people thought that they may not need a car, or they may not need a driver anymore, right? So this is where penetration pricing helps you. It gets you to a very large set of customers very, very quickly, right? The third option we have, the third pricing tactic that I wanted to discuss, was essentially around premium pricing. And premium pricing is really based upon a brand value, about creating. In order to set a premium pricing, you need to invest a lot more in terms of the brand itself, right? That the brand has to be perceived as giving you more value, right? So for example, if you are going and if you wanted to buy a Sabyasachi outfit, right, it is going to be expensive because it's got a brand associated with it, right? So when you are talking about premium pricing, it's not just when you're talking about premium pricing, it is not just about the cost of the material itself, the cost of the material and the labor itself, but the cost of building and supporting that brand itself, right? So, for example, luxury car brand can charge more than other manufacturers for a similar model because of that brand value, right? Then you have a strategy around price skimming, right? And price skimming basically tells us that if you have the same product, for example, somebody wanted to buy a phone, right? You'll find that if you go to a Samsung, right, there are multiple phone ranges, probably within 100 rupee, 200 rupee intervals, right? So there is a product for every segment, and essentially the objective here is that we will come to price skimming a little bit. What this example is a little different with Apple, right? What it's done is it's set a high price, right? When you introduce a new product, you are introducing it at a much higher price point, and then as you are about to launch a new product and you are stuck with inventory, you start to gradually lower it over time, so that people get the perception that they are buying a high valued product at a lower price point, right? So they're getting a sense of fulfillment out of it, right? So you'll see this many cases at launch prices are very high, and then gradually it is reduced over time, right? The next example, Bata, right? It's something that I think is a household story, right? It's a psychological pricing, and it it creates the perception of lower value by just pricing things at 9.99 instead of 10, right? Just that one paisa is not going to add to anybody, and in most cases probably will end up paying 10. But just that it looks not 10 is the most important thing here, right? So you're setting prices to create a perception of value or to influence the customer's buying behavior. Now today, when you walk into a Bata, you know that this is how they're going to price their products, right? So now it doesn't hit you as much, but when it came out, right, that was the novelty. And we have seen this model getting extended multiple in other fast fashion domains as well, right? Zara or something like that, right? Where prices are kept such that it feels not expensive, right? That's the idea behind it. Indigo, we talked about its dynamic pricing policies, right? More or less surge pricing. That's a strategy that is very common whenever there is a massive change between demand and supply, right? Promotional pricing, again, while you can have discounts, right? You can have discounts on, a company can offer discounts on its products, right? But promotional pricing, you will find that more at in marketplaces, right? Where they would probably, the marketplace can negotiate with all the vendors who are selling in a particular marketplace and get them all to agree to a certain discount. With the intention that the collective discount is going to bring more footfalls into the marketplace itself, right? So that's important, right? If it's just an individual company that is offering, it can offer a discount on one product, right? But by creating it a holiday sale out of it, right? That's where promotional pricing comes into picture, right? You have pricing models like bait and hook. This is very popular with, anybody who's bought an inkjet printer will know about this, right? Whether it is an Epson, whether it is a HP, whether it is a Canon, right? You sell the, or even a Gillette for that matter, right? You sell the instrument at a discount or even at a loss, right? And then you have expensive consumables, right? So a razor blade, right? A Gillette razor blade might be sold for really cheap, but then the razor, the blades, the cartridges themselves are expensive. That's how they're making up the revenue, right? So quite a few pricing tactics that I discussed over here, right? Wanted to discuss a few more. Freemium pricing, I think we've already discussed the freemium policy, the freemium model itself, so I'm not going to go there. You could have time-based pricing, right? You can have, day of the week based on that, right? You will find not only cinema halls, a lot of parking charges are based on that, right? Parking on weekends may be higher as opposed to parking at during weekdays, right? Or vice versa, depending on where the parking spot is, right? The same product could be sold in multiple places at different prices, right? For example, let me take an example of in the US, right? Or why go into the US, right? Even if I look at the same, sabzi guy selling sabzi at a mandi, right? That will be a lot cheaper. But then you'll have vendors who may come home, who may sell a product at home itself. I got a question from Param, who asked that in IPL days, IPL is also selling their rights, right? So IPL, what it is selling is, it is selling rights for the sponsorship, so essentially it is partnering up and it is selling the rights to become its title sponsor, rights to broadcast the content that IPL is creating, which is the cricket match on a particular channel. So it's selling its digital rights, right? Coming back to our discussion, we could have two-part pricings, right? Two-part pricing is a fixed fee that you have and then a additional fee per usage. So if you are getting into a Tata Sky, if you buy a Tata Sky plan, right, you might have a basic plan that you start with, and then you can have an a la carte menu depending on which other channels you may want to subscribe to, right? You also have price discrimination, so discriminatory pricing in terms of different categories, right? And you'll find that being done on for a philanthropic cause, right? If you're talking about Indian Railways, right, there are discounted fares available for senior citizens or for students or for certain categories of medical patients, right? So this is again discriminated price. You are charging differently to different customer segments, right? The next tactic is even more interesting, right? It's called loss leader pricing, and essentially what you are doing is you are luring in your customers with a ridiculously low price for one or two essentials, with the hope that you make up your losses by because once your customers comes to your store, they might buy more expensive products, right, at a higher prices. So on an average, you should be making more money per customer who's coming in, right? So Big Bazaar offering 1 rupee sales on onions, right? You buy 1,000 rupee worth of product and you get 1 rupee. You get 1 kilo of onion for 1 rupee or 2 rupees, right? So that's a model which it gives you a lot of promotional material to talk about. You are going to print all your ads saying that get onions at 1 rupee, right? And then in the fine print is like you get it only when you buy 1,000 rupees worth of product, right? And in that 1,000 rupees of that product, you would probably have marked it up by a 1%, 2%, 3% higher, right? So that you make up for the loss of when you have to sell, the promised goods at a lower price, right? The next one is volume pricing, right? Metro Cash and Carry was a very popular example, right? Offering deep discounts to or wholesale pricing, right? When you are essentially this kind of a model works when you have you're trying to cater to small shop owners, right? And you are giving them pricing, a lower pricing for buying in higher volumes, right? Why this works is because in many cases, the moment somebody buys in larger quantities, right, your inventory gets emptied out faster, right? Typically, if a Metro Cash and Carry is selling its products to another business owner, a small Kirana store or something like that, what is happening is instead of Metro trying to sell to retail customers, right? What it is doing is it's moved the cost of holding inventory to the Kirana shop owner, right? And essentially that, because it's no longer has to stock that inventory and pay for any losses or anything that happens to it while it is in storage, it is able to offset and offer a lower price point to this Kirana shop owner, right? The Kirana shop owner will then buy this in volume and then probably stock it in their shop, right? So it is taking up shelf space in their shop. And he or she is willing to buy in volume for the additional discount that is being offered, right? Bidsvilla, I am not sure if many of you have used this website in India, right? And it allows people to bid on products or services with the lowest bidder winning with the lowest bidder or the highest bidder kind of winning the item, right? So you have reverse auction. You also have things like eBay. When eBay originally came out, they used to go, they used to have an auction mechanism. So you could make a bid within a finite amount of time, and whoever has that, you would not know the other bids, or you might even know, you might see the bids going up, right? So that way you could determine what is the price of a product that does not otherwise have a fixed value that is marked on it, especially when it comes to reused products, right? I'm going to discuss a few more examples. Bear with me a little bit, right? Because I do not know which model is going to become important for which one of you, right? As you go about setting up your company. Hotstar has a tiered pricing. This is again different levels that are being offered. Netflix has streaming pricing. So there is a service that it is providing, and it has a fixed cost to it, right? There is also price bundling, right? Now, this is a little bit more interesting, right? If you wanted to go to, say, for example, Nico Park, right? And earlier on, you could have an unbundled price. You could go in front of any one of those rides in the park, and they would have a separate ticket counter. So you could buy tickets for whichever ride you wanted to take, right? Instead, what you could do these days, what ends up happening is you buy an entry ticket with X number of rides that are thrown in, right? Irrespective of whether you are going to ride them or not, right? So it allows them to make a seemingly more interesting appeal to the customer, saying that, if they have 20 rides, now you might not physically have the time to go in, stand in queue and ride all those 20 rides, right? But by saying that one ride used to cost you 50 rupees, 20 rides, instead of costing you 1,000 rupees, I'm going to give it to you for only 500 rupees. It creates a perception that your per unit or per ride cost is lower, right? But you may or may not be able to ride all of them, right? So by bundling the price, it is possible to create a perception of value, right? So that's price bundling. You can have postpaid mobile phones, right? Pay as you go kind of pricing. You use your product, and as long as you are using it, you kind of pay at you have a certain number of minutes that you have bought, right? You buy a I got a little confused over there. Pay as you go pricing. So as in, you have a monthly bill that comes along, right? When you get your bill, you will be told how much have you consumed, and you know the rate at which you will be billed, so you know what your final pricing is going to be, right? There are markdown pricings, which are a little different from discounts. The markdown pricings are essentially before you get into when you have new stock coming in. You need to clear the inventory. You need to, even if it means that you need to actually clean out space so that it can be washed and cleaned. Sometimes the situation comes to that, where you have to sell out your inventory so that you can just clean out the space, right? So before the new stock comes in, right? So you might be willing to, the delay is going to affect you significantly. So you might be willing to go very, very deep discounts in order to ensure that your inventory is cleared out, right? I think I already kind of discussed auction pricing and search pricing, right? Price lining is when you have multiple products, and each of these products are very close to their price point. So maybe 100 rupee difference, 200 rupee difference. Samsung uses this very often. If you look at their range of mobile phones, starting from the 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 category, you go all the way to about 50, 60, 100,000 rupees category, you will find that there are variants that are available either from the current model, or from the previous year's model, or from the years before that, such that there is a combing effect on that, and you have a product that is available in very close price points, so that when a customer comes to buy a product, you can be upsold on the next one, right? If you had maybe a 10,000 rupee budget, you would feel that maybe I can stretch it to 10,200. If you had a 10,200 rupee budget, maybe you'll feel that I can stretch it to 10,400. Right? Let me get a slightly better model. And this is how you create a price lining strategy, getting people to buy a more expensive product, essentially. What else do we have? We have Zoom card, right, which is contract pricing, right? You'll find that with a lot of hotels as well, right? If you are taking a monthly rental or a week-long rental, right, you might be able to get a longer term contract, right? In the US, if you got a cell phone service for a longer contract of 2 years or more, they might be willing to give you the cell phone for free, right? So that's where contract pricing comes in, and it ties you down with paying for the entire contract amount, right? So many times when we are getting into business-to-business deals, we look for this kind of annuity contracts, so longer-term contracts. So at least we know that a fixed revenue is going to come in on a fixed duration. It reduces volatility within the business itself, right, and makes it easier for you to predict what your next quarter's or the quarter after's revenue is going to be, right? Then there is decoy pricing. Decoy pricing is essentially pricing an option without giving a price, without really making it an option, right? So when you have if you do not want to sell a particular product, you price it such that it is not attractive to the customer, right? Say for example, I do not want to sell I do not want to sell small pizzas, right? I am going to price it almost as much as a medium pizza, right? So that if I wanted to order a pizza, I might be like, oh, this is only a 5% difference, and I get a completely, I get double the pizza volume. Why will I ever buy the smaller one, right? So you find this as decoy pricing, because chances are the company probably did not want to sell the least attractive option, right? Optional pricing is similar to unbundled pricing. So essentially, rather than offering, it's opposite of bundled pricing, right? So where you have a primary product, a primary service that is getting charged, right? For example, a ticket in a low-cost airline, you have the ticket price, which is your primary cost, and then luggage costs, your costs of essentially meals on board, right? These are all priced optionally. So it's been unbundled, right? And this allows, where this is helpful is if you want to cater to a segment where there is a majority of the segment who may not really want all the options. In that case, an optional pricing allows you to deliver more value to your core customer segment, right? Then there's flat rate pricing, right? Does not matter what you do, this is how much you pay. Right? It's a fixed fee for a product or service, regardless of how it is used or in combination with other factors. In the US, you would find something called a flat box, right? If you get a box from the post office, and whatever you put in it, you can always ship it for a fixed fee, right? So that's a flat rate box. Other techniques that are available over here, you will get loyalty cards, right? Loyalty cards are a great way to price things, and what it allows you to do is, you are essentially, the loyalty card is just another way of giving a discount, right? But by creating a loyalty card, you can ensure that the customer will come back because they feel that there is some additional value that has been left over, right? So if you create a loyalty card and you go to your favorite coffee shop and they say that 6 cards, I'll give you a loyalty card. Every time you get a coffee, it gets punched. For 6 punches that have been made in the card, the 7th coffee is on the house, right? It's not that they're giving you a free coffee. It's because that 7th coffee has been priced into the cost of the previous 6 coffee that you had, right? But you feel happy about it. The customers feel happy about it, right? That they were rewarded, and that's the benefit of loyalty cards. Right? In many cases, I have seen franchisees or companies, especially retail stores, will give you a coupon for when you shop next, right? So that's another form of loyalty card. I've seen examples where Macy's would offer you, if you bought $100 of product, it would offer you $10 of loyalty cards. But the trick was that instead of giving you one loyalty card, they would give you two $5 loyalty cards that could not be redeemed at the same time. So essentially, it is giving you a discount or what is perceived as a discount or as a benefit, but ensuring that you come back to the store again. Because every time you come back, you might shop for $100, right? Who knows? Right? We already discussed loss leader pricing. There's loyalty pricing as well, right? Loyalty itself can be a traded commodity, and you have loyalty aggregators like companies like Payback, right? Where you have, where you have a partner network where if you are shopping at various places, you collect loyalty points and you can redeem them for other goodies, right? Now, in the process, what ends up happening is it is decoupling your reward with, if maybe your customer does not want to buy your product again as a reward, right? So let them buy whatever they are happy with. And these loyalty pricing things, companies, they essentially create a common currency, if you will, in terms of this, by introducing these loyalty points, common loyalty points that can be redeemed across multiple partners, right? It is facilitating the the loyalty that the customer feels towards you, right? What else, right? This kind of, I hope that kind of gave you an understanding of when you launch your product in the market, what kind of pricing would you want to go with, right? Would you want to start with a discounted pricing on from day one? Because the moment you offer a discounted pricing, the market kind of starts to perceive your product to be priced at that point, right? Or do you start with a premium model? Do you start off with an Apple kind of a model where you start off with a very high price and then see how many customers are biting at that level, and then you start offering small discounts to see how many more customers are biting at what level, and then let that continue for a little while until you've kind of bottomed out on your pricing, and then probably introduced a new variant of your product at a price point where most of your customers were buying the previous version of the product, right? So that could also be your pricing tactic, right? So depending on your product, you can choose what kind of a pricing tactic would work for your product. But again, try it out until you take your pricing tactic to the market, to your end consumers. You will not know what you are worth, right? So that is very important. Go and talk to your customers, right? That brings us to the fourth part of today's discussion, which is if you know your price, right, what price you are selling at, if you know your cost, right, so you know what is the profit that you are making per unit of sale that you are going to make. Along with that, if you know your target geography, right, which markets are you going to sell in, and your the market size, right? How many people can you reach in that market, right? You can now start to make projections about what would be your revenue next quarter, what would be your revenue the year after, right? And so on and so forth. And there are multiple ways to project these revenues, right? What we are going to look at today is essentially revenue forecasting based on historical data. So this is applicable when a business is more or less in a steady state situation. If your business is on a high growth path, or if you are unsure about your customer base right now, right, you may not be able to create revenue projections very well because you are still seeing a lot of uncertainty in your business, right? But once you are in a more of a stable state, you can go back and analyze. You have that mechanism available to you to be able to analyze the past data, right? So how we do this is a 5-step process by defining your funnel, because for every funnel is going to be different. What are the stages of your leads? What is the likelihood of a lead converting into actual revenue? So we start off by breaking down your sales process into distinct stages, right? And these stages could be lead generations, could be lead qualification, proposal, negotiation. So these are all the steps that you are going to go through in your business, and this is going to be unique to your business, right? Then you get into trying to collate historical data, right? In your current sales funnel, right? How did things happen? How did these things happen in this quarter or in the quarter prior to this, right? So you look into that data and look at what was the conversion rate through your funnel in your historical data, in your say, for example, your current or in the quarter gone by, or in your current quarter. That analysis, once you use that data to calculate the conversion rates for each stage of the funnel, right, then it allows you to project your future revenues, right, based on the number of leads in your current funnel, right? And then you kind of follow up on what are your revenue projections, right? If you make provisions for additional projections as needed. For example, you know that if you are going to create a projection for the month of, say, for Q3 in India, right? So August, September, or rather September, October, October, November, December, right? If you're going to plan for that quarter, you know that there are going to be a lot of holidays and everything because it is you have the Dasera, you have lots of festivities, and also the number of working days available may be lesser, so you might not be able to sell as much, right? So these are extraneous adjustments that are needed to your projections. So let me break this down a little bit in terms of a funnel, right? Based on your type of business. And this funnel is going to look very, very different if you are running a business-to-business operation, or you are doing a business-to a B2C kind of a funnel, or you're running a B2G kind of a funnel, right? What does this look like for a B2B sales, right? If you are if your business of your product or your service is tailored towards selling to other businesses, then you will be generating leads, right? You will be your sales teams will be talking to other businesses, and whoever you are talking to, they are also businesses, right? So they are likely to have their own processes, right? So you can set up a meeting with whoever is your counterpart, right? You can qualify the lead. Is this business really would they have a requirement for the product that you are selling? Have they recently procured a similar product from a competitor, right? So this is essentially where you are qualifying the lead. You are following up either by phone or by email and trying to understand if it is possible to make a sale there. So the funnel will shrink a little bit because you will make your proposal to only a few of those companies, right? Of those qualified leads. And only a few of them will come down to actually who would be interested in your product. So they would be coming down into a negotiation phase, right? So this funnel becomes even smaller, and only a few of them will go ahead and close, right? So now that you have a sense of what this funnel looks like, what this B2B sales funnel kind of looks like, let me take a more numerical example, right? For example, if you have a historical data from your last quarter saying that you had about 2,000 leads, and from that historical data itself, you had about 40% conversion between the leads that were generated to the ones that were qualified. Right? So that kind of, a quick analysis will tell you that about 800 of those leads were qualified leads, right? Then you look at your conversion rate again. About 40% of your leads converted into qualified leads. About 50% converted into proposals, right? So out of this 800, 400 proposals were sent out, right? Out of which 75% came into negotiations. So 75% of 400, about 300 conversations or leads resulted in negotiations, right? Out of which maybe 80% closed, right? At an average deal size of 5 lakhs. So Out of this 300, 240 deals closed with a revenue of 12 crores. So this is your analysis of this is essentially your analysis of the past quarter. How did things happen? With this data, you can now start to make reasonably confident projections about the immediate next quarter, right? Now, if you know that if your marketing team has helped you develop 500 leads, right? You can apply the same conversion rates to come at a projected value of 15 crore for the next quarter. If at this point, you already know that your marketing team is not doing very well, probably their leads are not as much, maybe they have like 1500 leads, and you know that your projected revenue out of that is only going to be as 9 crores, right? So what you might do is you might intervene and pump in more money towards generating more leads so that the top of funnel is always fulfilled. Remember, your business development essentially happens above this lead generation phase. The moment a lead has been created, you have the contact information of that particular lead, right? But that contact to know about your products and services, there is a lot of marketing efforts that has gone in. So I'm not covering the marketing part of it. I'm going through only the sales pipeline today, right? And if you know that your marketing costs were about 6 lakhs and you acquired 300 new customers, so that kind of gives you a sense of what your cost of customer acquisition is, right? One insight that you will get from this particular slide is that in the B2B scenario, your cost of acquiring customers are going to be high, right? But given that your average deal size is about 5 lakhs, 2,000 to acquire a new lead, right? Or a new deal, I think is very reasonable, right? Now I'm going to leave this slide on the screen for a couple of seconds in case you wanted details of how we got the previous calculations, right? And then I'm going to move on into another scenario, which is mainly for business to consumer, more of a direct funnel, right? In this direct funnel, you'll find that the names have changed a little bit, right? And the names have changed because essentially what is happening here is you want your end consumer to buy, right? So for them to know about your company, that your product exists in the market, there has to be a significant amount of awareness that has happened. Now, you do not know who your customer is who has become aware. And unlike a B2B scenario where you could make a call and ask whether there was an interest in your product or not, in a B2C scenario, you cannot do that because you do not know at this point who your customer or who has gotten to know about your product. All you know is probably they saw your product offering as an ad that showed up while they were browsing a news portal, for that matter, and somebody was looking for some for a particular product. They just happened to see your product that kind of created a temporary interest, right? Did they follow up on that? Did they start looking at your product and thinking, I need something like this? Who are the other people who are selling this same product, right? Because the moment your potential consumer has that interest in buying that product, they're going to look at competition. They're going to look at who are the key people selling this, what is the best product, right? And then they will do their own research before they come to you in order to buy, right? So this is where your prospective customers complete their purchase and become customers, right? But not only that, you have to follow up on that and provide them with a reasonable degree of post-sales support, right? Whether it is through loyalty programs or through marketing or through social media engagement, so that you retain them, and in the next round, you don't go back all the way from the top, but you can keep on bringing them back to your store to buy more of your product, right? So let's take an example of this in numerical terms, right? So awareness, you may not know, right? You may have a marketing budget, you may have put out a bunch of impressions. What your marketing team might tell you is that your ad was shown to 5 million people, right? Out of which probably about 50,000 leads or 50,000 people scroll back to your ad again, right? Which is a sense of interest, right? And then probably you have you have this data because you are in the B2C space, that interest to consideration conversion is going to be very small, right? Unlike the 50%, 60%, 70% conversions that you were seeing in a B2B scenario, where if you have a conversation with your customer, you can potentially help them, you can potentially convince them. Here, in the B2C scenario, the decision making is happening in your absence and you cannot influence it, right? So the conversion rates are much lower, right? So if I have about 50,000 people who were interested or who were subconsciously interested, let me put it that way, about 20% of them may be considering your product, which means that there are about 10,000 people out of 50,000, there are about 10,000 who might be interested, right? If I look at from those who are considering, maybe 30% will convert, right? So maybe about 30,000 considerations are coming in, out of which about 30% is converting, so about 750 conversions, right? So that kind of tells me, because it is a B2C scenario, the ticket size of your sale is also going to be much smaller, right? Your ticket size maybe, whereas your B2B scenario, your ticket size was probably about, say 5 lakhs, your ticket size for a B2C scenario could only be 1,000 rupees, right? So that kind of tells you that for 750 conversions, you will get about 7.5 lakhs in revenue. Using the same projection, if your interested leads goes up to 75,000, so that is almost a 50% uptick in the number of interest, right? In the number of awareness or number of impressions, let me put it that way. You can calculate the same using the same methodology, and you will arrive at a projection of maybe 11.25 lakhs in the next quarter. Now, the interesting thing to note here is, if you needed such a high bump in your awareness, right, in your awareness campaign itself, your marketing sales costs could be high. It could be 3.5 lakh. But new customers that are added on are relatively new, right? So you would want to retain some of the previous customers and get some new customers that you are bringing on. So your cost, your acquisition cost for a B2 scenario may actually be very high proportion to the ticket size of the sale itself, right? So that's an interesting point that you have to keep in mind for direct to consumers products. Your customer acquisition costs are relatively much higher, often going up into 20, 25, 30 or even 40% of your product cost, right, of your revenue, right? I'm going to leave the screen again if you wanted to go back and check the previous slide. Right? And the penultimate discussion point that I have for today is essentially what happens when you have a B2G scenario, right, where you are essentially going to deal with the government, right? Because you are dealing with the government, you will not have very large number of customers. You're not talking about hundreds and thousands of customers. The government may have maybe 100 projects, maybe you could be talking about with 100 different departments within the government or their channels, right? So 100 different municipalities that you may be talking with at any given point, right? So in the B2G scenario, even 100 leads is a large number of leads, right? And then you have to go through a pre-qualification process, because the funnel, if you look at it, the funnel has changed from the funnel stages have changed from what it was previously. Here we are talking about pre-qualification, because if you are going in for a government project, chances are that the government will have certain conditions that you must fulfill. whether you have executed contracts of a certain value before you take up this contract, or you have executed a certain number of government projects before you are allowed to do that, or you have developed something similar for some other department, right? So these are pre-qualification criteria that must be met, and in many of the leads, you might not be able to fulfill all those criteria. So a 60% conversion is a reasonable conversion. So if I have about 100 leads to discuss, or 100 requests for proposals for which I have applied to, maybe I'll meet the pre-qualification criteria for about 60 of them, right? Then it will come to the proposal phase, because it's a government, right? They are not going to come to you to buy something. They're going to open up a tender, right? And you have to bid for that tender. So you are going to put in a proposal, and you may be called for technical discussions or commercial negotiations once you have qualified. Into the initial rounds, right? So if we say there's a 50% conversion, which is a little bit on the higher side, but let's take that for the sake of our illustration. So you have 60 pre-qualified leads, out of which perhaps 30 you are making it into the negotiation phase, right? And if you are getting into a negotiation, then probably you'll have a very high chance of being able to convert it. So out of 30 proposals, you might have a history of converting 24 negotiations, right? Now, either you can start off with these numbers and compute this, or these numbers is what you have as real data points, right? This is your truth. So you might create this proportionality, these proportions based on the actual numbers that are coming out, right? Since it's a government contract, right, your average deal size is going to be much higher, right? So if you get 21 contracts that are awarded, your revenue comes up to about 10.5 crores, right? Similarly, if you're dealing with 120 leads, scaling up or going through the same funnel proportionately, you might end up with about 13 crores in revenue. This funnel, when you are analyzing your data, these conversion numbers also kind of help you understand where in your funnel you need most help. Do you need help on the marketing side in terms of creating more leads, or do you need to have more diligent salespeople or more qualified salespeople who can convert, who can convert a proposal or who can convert a negotiation into a contract itself? So looking at this funnel also tells you how your projections are going to come up. There are exigencies like, you might be losing your senior sales representative might have quit, right? So you know that they are going to take away some of the leads with them, right? So these are adversities that you have to be prepared with when you are refining your projections, right? Also, one more point I wanted to put out there before I close the discussion was that your marketing sales costs for a B2G segment is relatively high, because many of these discussions require physical travel in going and meeting with several bureaucrats, interacting with them. So you have a lot of travel that is essentially your dead time, right? So the number of customers are not very large, so your customer acquisition cost can actually be on the higher side for B2G projects, right? Same as the previous one, I'm just going to leave this slide up there for a couple of seconds so that you can come back and review it as per your convenience, right? So that kind of brings me to the end of my discussion today, where I wanted to essentially look at 4 aspects of revenue generation, especially for young entrepreneurs who are going to be starting out their entrepreneurial journey, where they are at a stage where their product is more or less ready. They want to take it to market, and you are thinking about how you are going to price your product or what is your revenue models. Remember, there is no one revenue model that is perfect. Each revenue model has its own pros and cons, but what model suits you is something that has to be discovered, right? Not only your revenue, if you undervalue your product, you are, there is a chance that your product may be misused. Therefore, when you are selling your product, it is important for you to clearly articulate what exactly are you selling and what are the restrictions associated with that sale. That is essentially what is getting captured in your licensing restrictions. Finally, based on the terms and conditions of the licensing, you are going to come up with your price that you are going to consider for allowing that sale to proceed, right? The more practice you have, the more customers that start to buy your product, you start to get a steady state sense of where your business is, and that allows you to make revenue projections. The moment you are able to make revenue projections, you may also be able to make expenditure projections, so that you know whether you should be, as a startup, whether you should be investing in buying new infrastructure, or you should be investing more towards putting out more ads out there, right? So it allows you to balance your your revenue projections with your most immediate expenses to be met as well, right? So that was all from my side. I would now hand over the stage to Vinod Shankar, who is the CEO of the Atal Incubation Center at Dayanand Sagar University, and I would request him to take you through the incubation facilities that are available at the facility. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Atanu, sir. So great session from your side, where we saw the different revenue models, licensing restrictions, pricing tactics, and revenue projections. So each one of these are very important for any startup, whether it is B2B or B2C or B2G kind of business. And we also saw the sales funnel and the approach to get more customers. So that was really a very comprehensive session. Thank you so much for that. So good evening, people, whoever is participating in this great webinar that happened today. So we thoroughly enjoyed all the concepts that were taught by Atanu sir. And we at Atal Incubation Center, we are a government supported incubator. So we offer different services like mentoring support and then seed funding support, and also software credits from companies like AWS, Freshworks, and many other corporates. And we also work with large number of corporates through their corporate social responsibility initiatives, wherein we support all the startups with their requirements of app development, software development, or whether it is pertaining to digital marketing initiatives, UI, UX, all of these. So we have two types of models. One is the virtual incubation, wherein people can avail all our services except the space. So for people residing in parts outside of Bangalore, where they cannot come to our facility and utilize the space, they can all avail our virtual incubation facility. And for those of you who are in Bangalore, you can feel free to reach out to us, wherein we can give you plug and play infrastructure along with whatever services I mentioned, like mentoring, seed funding, and other support services. So with that, I would like to end my remarks here and hand over to Atanu sir if there are any queries from the audience. So please feel free to answer them, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod sir. The floor is now open, right? If there are any questions that are coming in, you can put it out in your YouTube chat itself, right? I'd be happy to take any questions regarding pricing tactics and all of that. Or we have, I think Vinod sir has already kind of left his credentials in the group chat as well, right? So you can definitely reach out to them. I think this is the very right time to develop your own companies, right? It is really a good time because there are lots of facilities in terms of not only support from the government. There is also a lot of policy support that is being extended in terms of compliance relaxations, our ability to support limited liability companies and one-person companies to, even if you were planning to do something yourself, My strong recommendation is that you convert it into a one-person company so that you get the benefits of the recognition that you get from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, right? It gives you a lot of taxation benefits. Working with an incubation center means that you have a lot of pre-incubation services that are made available to you, right? And it really allows you to showcase your idea. What may start off with maybe you and a friend of yours, right? Or a couple of more people, right? 3-4 people coming together. What may seem like a small idea, trust me, if you are solving a problem that you have faced yourself, there are probably hundreds and thousands or even hundreds of thousands or even millions of people out there who may be facing the same problem. So don't let that idea be locked up within you. If you can find a solution, there is a way to find people who would be willing to pay for it, right? Thank you, everybody. I noticed Professor Saraswat had also joined in. Welcome to the session, Professor Saraswat. If there are no further questions, we will close the session here. Thank you all for joining in. It was wonderful to have all of you here today. Thank you.